On this episode of the Oklahoma Breakdown with Eichert and Lehman, we're joined by ESPN's Mike Golic Jr. to discuss the biggest national stories in college football, the blue chip ratio, the University of Houston suspending voluntary workouts, UT athletes demanding changes on campus, and a new development at Iowa. Before we talk to Mike, we dive into local college football news, OU and OSU guys being named to preseason All-American teams, Malcolm Rodriguez testing positive for COVID-19, and Greg Abbott's comments about seating capacity and how that affects the schools in Oklahoma. In Football Guys Talking Basketball, we give you the latest details on the NBA's return and the pushback from some players led by Kyrie Irving. We give you our winners and losers of the weekend and talk about a big donation from Trey Young in keeping it local. As always, we finish by answering your Twitter questions. Please download and subscribe to the podcast, rate it 5 stars, and write us a good review. Follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search Oklahoma Breakdown on any of those, and you'll find us. All right, my man Michael Hosty will kick this thing off. It's time for the Oklahoma Breakdown. Beautiful Monday, June 15th. Now recording this on Sunday night. Just a reminder, our sponsorship packet is done. And Ted, we've got a few meetings this week. We've gotten, I would say they're in between nibbles and bites.
How about that?
Yeah, so fingers crossed. Still targeting August 3rd as our first episode with sponsorship reads. So if your business would like more information on sponsoring the podcast during football season, email Teddy and me at theoklahomabreakdown@gmail.com. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk some football. We've got Mike Golic Jr. to talk about all the national stories in college football coming up. But first, let's take a look at some of the local stories in college football. And let's start with Chuba Hubbard and Creed Humphrey, who were both named first-team preseason Walter Camp All-Americans, which we all know how important preseason All-American teams are, Ted. That's where the real players are decided, but still a good honor, a solid honor for two really damn good football players here in the state of Oklahoma. So you've got Chuba Hubbard and Creed Humphrey that were named first team on the preseason Walter Camp All-American teams, and you've got Tylan Wallace, who was named second team. And I was thinking about it because I don't know the last time Oklahoma State had more preseason All-American guys than Oklahoma, but I couldn't really make an argument, really. I mean, I was trying to think about maybe OU guys that got snubbed from these lists, and Walter Camp is, kind of, the creme de la creme of the lists, but were you surprised that there weren't any other OU guys? Because it's kind of a mystery right now who their big-time playmakers are going to be, not just on offense, but on defense too. So, I mean, I know it's not an ideal situation right now, but there's really no one where I was like, oh, yeah, that guy should have been on there.
The only one I could think of maybe, but I don't know the list of kickers out there very well, would be Burkich, since he hasn't missed one. But
that's a good one. That's a good point.
Other than that, we're going to start a new quarterback. Our best player offensively, CeeDee Lamb, is gone. Creed's the leader of that offensive line, and he gets the first team nod there. Everyone else, we've got some really good players, and I fully expect by the end of the season that we're going to have another breakout wide receiver star. We're going to have some star names, and the all Big 12 list is going to be riddled with Oklahoma players. But best player on the defensive line, Neville Gallimore, interior, gone. Kenneth Murray, best linebacker that we had, gone. So, we're missing all those guys. We're set up nicely to replace most of them, but I really don't have much beef with it. The only thing is, Tylan Wallace's second team, you think that I personally think he's better than Chuba Hubbard, but wide receivers a much more packed room, and having missed last season, it's really hard to claim that number one spot, that first team spot. So really don't have much beef with it, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of made me come to the realization that we don't really know who the offensive playmakers for Oklahoma are going to be. I think a lot of us anticipated it being Jaden Hazelwood. Well, with the injury, it doesn't sound like he's going to play at all. You've got Trajan Bridges, who is going to be in all likelihood suspended for the first 5 games. Will it be Theo Weiss, who showed flashes of being a really, really good player
So I like
during his freshman
I think
season? It's got to
Theo
be
Weiss,
Theo Weiss, right, to
I,
step up.
I think he's going to be the breakout guy, wide receiver. Um, I'd watch out for the running back room. We've got a bunch of different guys that I feel like have the opportunity to be really good. And, everyone's kind of going into this season focused on Kennedy Brooks, and he's really good. Don't get me wrong here, but rarely has Lincoln Riley been a one running back guy. Now, we saw that happen down the stretch last season, and now we end up with Trey Sermon at Ohio State. But, I would expect some other running backs, you could take a guess at any, flip a coin on who it might be. But I think another running back is going to emerge. And I think we may have some guys over the middle too. Our fullback and tight end situation looks really good. So we may have some guys emerge there. But as of right now, it looks lean at playmakers, but you and I know that Oklahoma replaces those guys better than anyone else. We kind of go through this
They
almost every
better.
year. Yeah.
They better.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like we have certainly had this discussion before. All right, another big story locally, the identity of one of the other Oklahoma State players that tested positive for coronavirus has been revealed, and he revealed it himself. Malcolm Rodriguez puts out a Twitter post saying that he has tested positive for COVID-19 and did so when he came back and was tested by the university. Remember, Rodriguez is a Wagner native. He was also their team's leading tackler last year and really, really converted to the linebacker position well after moving down from safety. I was really impressed. Probably shouldn't have been surprised because, like our boy Kelly Gregg always said, hey, he was a wrestler.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be
That's right.
surprised. But
That's exactly right.
when you look at it, you've got Malcolm Rodriguez and Eamon Ogbongbemiga as two of the three that we're assuming tested positive for Oklahoma State football. Do you worry that it's your best players if you're Mike Gundy? Are you going, okay, guys, like, can we get some like redshirt freshmen that we're not going to play at all? Can those be the guys testing positive? Not your best two players on defense. I guess, what is Colby Harvell-Peel going to test positive next?
Well, here's the thing. Part of you is probably a little nervous. The other part of you is probably like, oh gosh, man, hopefully that if they test positive now, they're not going to be able to get it again later whenever it's really going to matter.
That's a great point.
But
Are they doing it on purpose? I don't know.
right. He is a heck of a player. And you look at that Oklahoma State defense, although they had probably the worst game plan I've ever seen in the history of organized football last year against
Not great.
Oklahoma, they do have some really good players, and they have them at all three levels. Couple of great safeties, backers are solid, and they've got, a lot of times returning starters is a stupid statistic, but in this case with Oklahoma State's defense, I don't necessarily think it is. I think they're returning some pretty good football players, and they've got a chance defensively to be way better than they've been recently, and maybe one of the better squads in the Big 12.
Yeah, and I think this year, especially when you're missing spring ball and you're not getting maybe some development from the young guys, it's important to have veteran players like Malcolm Rodriguez, like Harvell Peel, like a couple of those other guys that they have. I mean, Mamiga, it's going to be interesting because when you have returning starters, they've played football. And I know that sounds simple, but some of these guys for other teams, especially in the Big 12, that are having to replace a lot of starters on the defensive side of the ball, they haven't played in games. Right. They haven't gotten those reps, and it's hard to simulate that. And in my opinion, it's impossible to simulate that. You just have to play, and you have to play in big-time games. So they're in a good spot. I'm with you. I think they're in a good spot. Now, one other big story, even though it's in the state of Texas, it certainly affects Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Governor Greg Abbott had a conference call with the Division I athletic directors in the state of Texas on Friday, and information from it leaked out because, of course, it's 2020 and people want to know what these people were talking about. And Greg Abbott basically said that he's anticipating stadium capacity will probably be at 50% to start the football season. Now, not extremely encouraging because, remember, Greg Abbott was the same guy that went from 25% to 50% real quick, and we thought things were trending in the right direction. But, with some of these spikes in coronavirus cases we're seeing in several states, is this something we should be concerned about, that he kind of flat out told these athletic directors, hey, expect 50% to start the season? Or it can always improve from here.
Yeah, I think that's probably the thing, is 50% that's a good place to stay. There's no reason right now to start declaring 75% or 80% or 100%, or even give a date where you may do that. We got a long time between now and whenever these games are going to be kicking off. So I think just to say, plan on that and we'll adjust accordingly. I think it's being conservative, but on the other end of it, we don't necessarily know. And it is a little bit troublesome to think of a reality, because I've felt all along that we're going to have full stadiums. So to think of the reality, okay, well, at least maybe if we're going to the state of Texas, which Oklahoma is nowhere near as impacted as the state of Texas is when it comes to the coronavirus. So maybe whenever we're visiting the state for football games, that those stadiums are going to be at 50% capacity. Part of you is like, hey, that's actually edge for us. Going down there in those home environments aren't going to be as difficult, but it still is scary to think about that. Okay, yeah, maybe this thing is going to be limited whenever we get there in September.
Yeah, and I mean, no offense to any of the other states, especially not the state of Oklahoma. We've got diehard football fans here, but the state of Texas, like, they really care about football, like a lot. So if they're going to be at 50% capacity, I got a feeling that maybe everyone just might be. And remember, that's just he was talking about just to start the season. So you could expand capacity from there. But yeah, that was kind of one of those moments where you realize that, okay, yeah, this whole coronavirus thing, it's still around and it's still going to affect the college football season. It's annoying. I'm over the coronavirus. I'm so over it. Friday was like the first day where I legitimately got mad, where I was just like, you know what? This thing sucks. I'm over it, because I got this notification. Like, I had still had this trip we're supposed to go on next week. In my phone, it pops up, hey, don't forget about your trip next week. And I was like, mother coronavirus. That's just, yeah, I think we're all at that point.
We were supposed to go to Disney World, and that got canceled. So imagine my son. And I'll admit that I was kind of thinking, yes, no Disney World. I don't have
no long lines.
I don't have to sit bake in the sun standing in line. But man, it's frustrating because we've been dealing with this for a while now. I mean, and
starting to wear on me, Ted. I've held strong for so long, but when that notification popped up, it was like, hey, you're going to Switzerland next week. I was like, no, I'm not.
How dare you? That's funny.
Stupid coronavirus. All right, let's move on to the national storylines in college football. And to help us do that, we were joined by ESPN's Mike Golic Jr., and here is that interview. It is our pleasure to be joined by the co-host of Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio. You can also see his absolutely beautiful face on every ESPN platform that exists on planet Earth. Mike Golic Jr. is in the house to talk some college football. How we doing, big guy?
I'm doing better after that. I need to get ESPN to invent more platforms so we can keep going with that, because I like the way that sounds when in actuality I keep telling people I just keep weaving myself into all the nooks and crannies so it's harder for them to fire me. It's a real heady play. I think it's worked so far.
I love that. Hey, if I know anything about ESPN technology, they're going to figure out more platforms, right? That it's coming. It doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming.
They're going to find
expanding.
a way.
Ever
Always.
expanding. Now, Mike, we've been friends for a long time, so I feel like it's only right that this is kind of an informal interview, more of a round table of three boys talking college football, as opposed to us just asking you questions, because that would just be kind of weird and boring since we're friends. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think it would be, and quite frankly, it'd be a waste of like all of the college football knowledge that's sitting here on this podcast. Like, there's a lot more and a lot better perspectives than just mine on this. So I especially knowing a lot of the things that are hanging out there right now, I'm really curious to hear what you guys have on a lot of this, because quite frankly, I'm going to steal your very good opinions as they come up and repurpose them on the radio show when I go on tomorrow. So
That's really all we're doing here, right? Is just gathering other opinions to use and steal. I love it.
Hey, I like it. Let's start with this, boys. Bud Elliott, he comes out with his list of blue chip ratio teams every year. And if anyone out there is not familiar with Bud Elliott's blue chip ratio theory, it basically says that a team has to have more 4 and 5 stars than 2 and 3 stars over the last 4 recruiting classes to be able to win a national championship. And for the last several years, and for a lot of recent college football history, it checks out. It certainly does. So Bud Elliott this week, he came out with his percentages of blue chip ratio teams, and he gave us 15 teams that he says can win the national championship. Alabama, to no one's surprise, comes in 83% blue chip ratio. Georgia, 82%, Ohio State, 80%, and then quite a big drop-off to the 4th team, Texas, at 64%, and you've got LSU, OU, Clemson, and Florida all sitting at 63%. Some other teams meeting the threshold: Michigan, Auburn, Penn State, the Golden Domers of Notre Dame. That's for you, Golic. And Washington, USC, and Texas A&M coming in at the 15th spot. So I know that a lot of people look at this and go, yeah, no duh, you want better football players. But there's also those people out there that go, hey, stars don't matter. It's about development. It's like, guys, that's the biggest load of shit ever. Stars do matter.
Yeah, I think that's always been, and I got into this argument with Clemson people a while ago, because that A is one of the more sensitive fan bases in college football, as I found out, but B is one that's hyper obsessed. And most people take what you just said, Gabe, as a slight against the coach when you try and argue that stars matter. Programs who identify with their coach want to say, we've got this great developer of talent, a guy who's going to do what other people can't with the talent that most other people would turn away. When in reality, Clemson's program is the perfect testament to what we're talking about here. They've been built on the Christian Wilkins, the Deshaun Watsons of the world, all of this great marquee talent, most recently T. Higgins and a number of those other guys that just walked out the door. Like, you're right. This should be the most obvious alarm sound to everyone who's ever watched a college football game.
I think it's funny, everyone's got their example of, well, we had a 3-star guy that won the Heisman, or we had a 3-star guy that ended up being a first-round draft pick. And there are a couple of those stories out there, but that's not the rule. That's the exception, right? Those things, I wouldn't say rarely happen. Guys do fall through the cracks. And the other thing is you're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-old guys that are getting offered scholarships and committing. And we've all seen guys that show up 6'1", 220 pounds, and by the time they're a senior, they're 6'5", and have put on 60 pounds of muscle. I mean, this is a time when guys are growing dramatically and can turn into different players. But it's all about the 5-star guys. I mean, it really is. You can go back and look at all the rosters. You can look at all of the first-round draft picks. I mean, there is a direct correlation between 5 stars and going in the first round. And there's no exact science. I mean, just like we all have a story of a 2-star that turned into a All-American, we also have 5-star guys that never even looked at the field. So there is no perfect science. But I would say that the Rivals, 247 Sports, all those groups are getting better and better and better at evaluating the talent. There's way more opportunities to see these guys, whether it's camps, whether it's huddle, whatever it is. There's more exposure than ever, and there's no doubt about it. I will say though, it is interesting that some of these programs that are in a threshold with other people fail year after year after year. And I do think
is this the part where you just shit on Texas A&M?
Yes.
Okay.
This is exactly
I
that
figured
part.
that was coming at some point.
Yes.
No, I mean, but it's true. There are some places that, for whatever reason, they always recruit well. They've got 4-star, 5-star guys. They're, a top 10 class every year. But for whatever reason, whether it's coaching staff, whether it's philosophy, whether it's just that losing tradition that is stuck around the program that can never get over the hump.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, looking in that regard, like a program like USC. That now this is going to be interesting is how well the years prior have done, because I think their most recent class was like 57th when it came in. At least I know in our rankings for ESPN they were in the 50s, but in general it was an abject disaster of a recruiting class for them. But there's been such a bulk of talent there. We're not that far removed from that Sam Darnold-led Rose Bowl team. Like, all those things are true. And last year, it also, I think this shows the value of injury in the right spots, right? Because USC had a freak show talent-wise last year, especially offensive skill guys on their roster. But when the most important position on your team gets as injured as it did at USC last year, you're going to have a hard time, even when you land on your eventual starter like Keaton Slovis, to ultimately be able to produce at that level. So that probably highlights the depth as much as anything, why this is a 4-year sample size.
Yeah, and that's the important part about the blue chip ratio for me, is just what you said, Mike. It's depth, because a lot of people think about the 4- and 5-star guys coming into the program and then producing during games. The way your team gets better is you've got all those talented guys going at it in practice. That's where the depth of a football team is built. That's where, if you lose a couple guys to injury, like you mentioned, you've got guys that have been practicing against each other. Like the old saying, it's cliche as hell, but iron sharpens iron. You get a bunch of talented, physically gifted guys going at it every day in practice. I mean, Mike, just like when you were playing at Notre Dame, Ted, just like when we were playing at OU, the hardest thing was practice. I mean, playing against really, really talented guys that know your schemes, that know your calls. I mean, that's where the real work happens. And when you just stockpile 4- and 5-star guys and you get over this threshold that Bud Elliott has got for this blue chip ratio, that's where the improvement in a football team comes. It's not just that you have talent. It's that talent is working against each other every single day.
I always make the joke about Alabama. When you look at their kickoff coverage team running down the field, it's like those guys start everywhere in the country except for Alabama, right? And it's
These guys are
future
terrifying.
All-Americans and first-round draft picks. It's insane. It looks like the X-Men running down covering a kickoff. But you do look like, take for instance last year, Baylor Bears. Baylor had one of the best defenses I've seen in the Big 12 in a long time. They were disciplined. They were led by seniors. But they had one of their best players on defense, their Mike Backer, got hurt. And whenever someone like that loses a big-time guy, it's just like you go from stud to just a guy really quickly. And as we all know, college football, man, you're going to get injuries, whether it's a rolled ankle in a game and you got to miss the second half, or it's a torn ACL in training camp and someone's got to fill in. I mean, Gabe, look at our game against LSU last year. Not saying it's a difference in the game, but, we
that
have –
secondary that the Sooners rolled out in the old Peach Bowl, not very good. You just got to – they didn't have the depth. They just didn't have the depth.
It. Ronnie Perkins is out. We miss a couple of guys because of a failed test, and we got no replacement for that. Kenneth Murray has to come out in the game, and, while I like Meade, he's nowhere close to Kenneth Murray. So – you have an injury, you have a guy miss a class, miss some grades, flunk some type of drug test, and all of a sudden you have a massive fall off in play.
Well, and that same thing happened in Notre Dame when they played Clemson in the CFP playoff 2 years ago. You have Julian Love, your starting corner, go down for just a few minute span of actual game time. And during that time period, Trevor Lawrence hits Justin Ross and T. Higgins for a couple of daggers, and all of a sudden a game that was a one-score game for the lion's share of the first half in a defensive struggle starts to pop open, and then you see the effects of all that. So you combine that also with just the way that college football's now playoff, but even back when it was the BCS is structured, is all of that depth allows you during the season, if you're these coaches, if you're Nick Saban, if you're Dabo, to grind these guys extra hard because you've got 40 days in between your last meaningful game of the regular season or the conference playoff. Now, I still in that area, a little less now with the playoff, but you get this big idea. You've got this massive gap in time where you get to get healthy. And so now all that depth that you use to take body blows off your starters for the majority of the year ends up being the best possible supplement and giving you the best version of this Voltron monster you've built for your playoff team. So college football's playoff structure allows for this to be an even bigger advantage than would already be.
Yeah, but I think there's no doubt development matters, coaching clearly matters, but just getting those guys, getting those guys that are simply more talented in high school and then getting them on campus and developing the more talented guys. That's the best way to do it, Mike.
Well, and I think that's because when you look at a couple of the names on this list, it's why things are going to get real interesting for Tom Herman and Kirby Smart real soon. Because if you keep rolling out classes like
Jim
Kirby
Harbaugh
Smart is recruiting, Jim Harbaugh as well. Kirby, him and Tom Herman should probably be 1 and 2 on that. But Kirby Smart, it's going to get real interesting because you had stability at the quarterback position. You let Jake Fromm chase off a couple of 5-star talent guys because you thought he was the dude, and you rolled out an offense that was still operating in the Stone Age, and now not getting over the Alabama hump is probably going to be one of those things like Jim Harbaugh not being able to beat Urban Meyer. But people can only tolerate that for so long. So Todd Monken's got a lot on his plate this year going in there as the OC. Like, if they don't let him open some things up and make some things happen on that offense, I have a feeling we're going to start to hear some of those rumbles that Jim Harbaugh got last year.
The real game changer for me has been, like, Alabama for the longest time since Saban's been there has just, I mean, it's been ridiculous the amount of players they have there. LSU has, traditionally had a ton of great players, corners, linebackers, rush guys on the outside, running back, skill position players. What's really changed, and I think is just vaulted, the Clemsons, the Alabamas ahead of everyone else, is the quarterback situation. I mean, for the longest time, Alabama had every position on the field, but they were just okay at quarterback. They weren't bad at quarterback. They were just okay, but they were good enough everywhere else that they could still go out there and win championships. I mean, remember when they played LSU? Was that 2012? It was like a, 10
the rematch?
Yeah, 14.
I'd rather watch paint dry than that national championship game. I mean, good Lord.
you've got 40 badasses out on the field and then 2 like nobody quarterbacks that aren't going to move the ball. But that's changed, man. And the way Alabama's recruiting at quarterback right now, the kid out of California that's going to be there as a freshman, supposed to be unbelievable. Clemson's got the ukulele kid coming in behind Trevor Lawrence. You had an opportunity if you had a super special quarterback. Think Auburn, think Vince Young at Texas. You had a super special quarterback. You could go in a one-game championship format. You had a chance where that guy could go out there, have the game of his life, you win a championship. Well, they've caught up on the quarterback race, and now you've got that +1. I mean, you've got an extra game to go through where it's a little more rare that you're going to get that type of play from just a one in a lifetime type of quarterback. So that's changed the game, man. The quarterback recruiting at Alabama, LSU, obviously with Burrow, that's Ohio State. If they keep bringing in those guys, man, it's going to be really hard to win a championship.
Now they've got all the creatures and the best quarterbacks. That's not fair. That's not how it's supposed to go. Guys, another big story this week in college football comes from the University of Houston. Surprised a lot of people, right? They suspended their voluntary workouts with 6 symptomatic student athletes in various sports testing positive for the coronavirus. I thought that we had come to a place where, yeah, we all recognize that people are going to test positive. And I know that these student athletes were symptomatic, but when you look at it, Houston, they didn't test their student athletes when they got back to campus, which is absolutely idiotic to me, boys. And then all of a sudden you have people test positive, and I know there's a lot of protests going on in Houston, and I know there's been a spike and all these things. I understand, but I was really surprised when they just shut it all down, Mike. I thought we were past this point, and this had me going, wait. Should I be worried? Because it's not like, I mean, Houston's right in the heart of Big 12 country here, man. This makes me pause just a little bit.
Yeah, I was a lot more worried until I read, and it was almost like a throwaway in there. It's, oh, by the way, Houston, like you said, didn't test their student athletes when they got back to campus. It was only if you were showing symptoms. And I said, in all of the dumbassery, how did we land on this? And like you said, Houston was a program that was flirting with potential, power, the potential move to the Power 5, huge TV market, all these reasons why that school in particular, and I get it, not everyone is going to be able to maybe afford pulling in the volume of tests that a lot of these big-time D1 Power 5 schools are going to. But at the very least, you have had these kids all out in all places of the world, wherever they are at home, and they're coming back to campus. If you were going to spend the bulk of your money on tests at any point, it would be when they first come back. So I'm only interested in, like you said, is I always wondered, and the question hanging out there was, what was going to be enough positive tests? And symptomatic, I think, is important to trigger a shutdown in all of this. And I think because of the uncertainty of, well, we didn't test anyone before this, and now we got to do all the contact tracing and things like that, they left way too many variables hanging out there in the open. Their strategy made no sense to me. So it feels a little more like a one-off.
Yeah. The worst thing about it, is that they're shutting this thing down, and everyone else across the country is going to hit the panic button a little bit, right? Like, do we have to shut down now if we have 6 positive tests? I mean, how is that going to be viewed for the rest of us? Are we coming back too quick? Everyone starts to maybe panic a little bit, but this is my weekly, PSA, to where I continue to say the safest place for these guys all along would have been campus. So now we're going to suspend the workouts and send them all back home. Go back to where you got the virus, and then we'll come back. It's just, I mean, I don't know. I don't understand why everyone keeps punting the ball later and later instead of get everyone on campus. You're going to have some things come up.
Let's talk about it, Ted. I feel like you need to get it out, bud. Just let's talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating. from the very beginning, I feel like the kids should have been on campus all along. And I know they shut a bunch of stuff down, but a lot of these campuses were empty, and a lot of these guys were sent home to hot spots where the virus is, it's Dallas and Houston are hot spots. There's a lot of virus that was going on there. I think the numbers are better now, but I don't know. If you have knee-jerk reactions, though, and whenever guys test positive, instead of just saying, okay, we'll deal with this, we'll separate them, we'll go through the proper protocol. If their symptoms are bad enough to where we have to hospitalize the guys, you do that. But I think you just continue to manage it. And I think it's dangerous just to go, oh my God, what do we do now? And just throw everyone into a panic instead of, you should have assumed something like this was going to happen whenever you brought all the guys back and started working out.
I think the only difference in this situation, because we've seen Alabama had 8 guys test positive or whatever it was. There have been other places, and they've been able to absorb it, just like you said, because they tested everyone when they came back. And they had all these plans of, all right, once we test everyone when they come back, they're going to work out with the same cluster of guys and only really come in contact with them. And so if someone tests positive, we know exactly who they've been around. Houston, for reasons I cannot fathom, yet again, didn't test everyone when they came back. And so now you got to wonder, all right, well, who else was he potentially around and who else potentially had it? Like, this feels like something so unique. And I we haven't seen like a rollout of everyone's plan, but we've talked to coaches from South Carolina, certainly in South Bend, everyone else, who it seemed to be pretty uniform across the board. We were going to test everybody when they got back. And so it leads to exactly what you just said, the ability to be able to absorb this a lot more calmly, say, all right, we knew when we tested all of these people, there were going to be some positives. We had the stuff ready to handle it. Not, well, let's leave a million variables open because we decided not to shell out the extra few $100s to make sure that everyone on here could get a test.
Yeah, and I mean, Joe Castiglione talked about the cost of the tests this week. I mean, and when you're looking at testing the entire team, the entire staff, yeah, it's expensive, but guys, these programs just have to come to the realization that they are going to have to spend a boatload of money on testing their players this year. That's just reality. And I know it's been rumored, hey, $15,000 to $18,000 for one round of testing, for the entire roster and all the staff that would need it. Okay, yeah, that's a lot of money, but think about all the money you lose if you don't play the season. That's the way that I see it. You got to just fork up the cash. And that's the weird part about Houston. They've got Tillman Fertitta. What? He's been throwing around cash there forever. Why didn't they just ask him? It doesn't make any sense. It's just dumb. It's stupid. I don't know how else to put it, that they didn't test their guys when they got there.
Well, here's the other thing is, do we know, did they test them all now? Have they said, okay, well, let's test everyone?
Well, they're symptomatic, so I assume that they tested them and they tested positive. Now it's like, oh, great, well, now you know.
Well, I'm saying, like, if at this point you say, well, we better go ahead and test everyone that's here, and if you do that, and maybe you find a couple more, 5, 6, the thing to remember is the protocol for a positive test is the same whether you have symptoms or not.
Right.
So I know 6 guys tested positive and they've got symptoms, and I think that's what kind of scares everyone, because we've had how many teams come back and haven't really heard of anyone having symptoms yet. It's all asymptomatic guys, like Oklahoma State had several of them, and Alabama. So I think that the fact that they actually had the symptoms got everyone a little bit worried, but the protocol's the same. They just need to test everyone and see who they've gotten separated.
Which, for what it's worth, I just looked back and pulled up their statement. It did not make mention of, we're going to test everybody now.
That makes too much sense, right?
They said, during this pause in voluntary workouts, UH Athletics will continue its stringent cleaning and sanitization protocols in all the facilities. UH Athletics will continue to partner with university officials, UH team physicians, and local health professionals to determine the best practices as it considers a return to workouts. I hope somewhere in that consideration they decide it would be a really good idea to test everybody.
I really don't think that, they're following. Did they really consult with everyone to figure out the best way to move forward? Because
I don't think so.
I don't know.
But I am curious if the players there at Houston signed any sort of liability waiver like the players at Ohio State had to. The Columbus Dispatch comes out with a report that Ohio State players had to sign a COVID-19 liability waiver that outlines the risks involved, and it calls for student athletes to follow strict health and safety protocols. They put it under the fun, fluffy title of the Buckeye Pledge, which is cute. Sure. But guys,
I feel like that's a summer program or something, a camp at a lake or something.
But this seems like it's going to be pretty standard. And I would be interested in, talking to other players across the country. I'm sure that guys have had to sign stuff like this everywhere. I mean, the university has to cover its ass. I mean, it does. We have to acknowledge that. And I'm sure these guys are happy to sign it, but some of their parents probably seeing they're not thrilled, but this is just a new reality. You're going to have to sign your life away with these coronavirus waivers. And it's just, I can't imagine that you'll be able to work out on campus or participate in team activities if you don't sign a liability waiver. It's just a weird time, right? And it's just added on to all the other liability waivers you sign as a college athlete.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part is we're all very used to like seeing those statements of like,
you may die. Okay, cool.
But that's the interesting part of this is I spent way too much of today reading about waiver and liability law and the way that you draft these statements. And that's one of the things that's missing from this is when you talk about like an assumption of risk, like this sounds like the sentiment of it all reads, we're going to try really hard at Ohio State to make sure you don't get sick. And you still might get sick despite our best efforts. The problem is usually it is like, Gabe, the amount of times that we all signed those documents that said risk of permanent injury or death in there. And you just go, well, yeah, no, I understand that's part of the drill and all this.
Yeah,
sports. Yeah. But like, that's not in this statement, which is interesting. And so I really wonder, like, if this was a liability waiver, we've all read enough of those to know this isn't like a very specific or strict one. And so I just wonder if this is something, if push came to shove, because this is a pandemic and because it's not things that we normally deal with, if there was something that happened, would a parent be able to actually go after this and pursue it in a legal way? Because this doesn't seem like the most ironclad document I've ever signed.
I don't know. That stuff's all real interesting. I don't know. I mean, if we're in a situation where a player can this season, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, whatever, a player can get the coronavirus and come back and sue the university for putting them at risk. I mean, if that's actually, if there's a process for that to happen, then we're kind of screwed, because ultimately someone's going to get it. And how could you ever find out that you actually got it from the university? Yeah, someone there may have it, but did you go out to eat? Did you go to a bar? Did you go to any parties? I mean, did you touch the doorknob whenever you're going into 7-Eleven? I mean, how can you ever find where the person actually got it? And I mean, that's really worrisome to think about. If we're in a situation where the universities feel like they may be able to be sued if a player or a student athlete comes up with the virus, then I mean, that is a scary road to go down, because
you also got to remember how these general counsels at universities and within athletic departments,
really cautious.
I mean, they're lawyers. They're looking at this from a worst case scenario perspective. So they're doing the smart thing, right? Hey, we're going to cover that base. We're going to make sure we cover. We're going to have all the guys sign this waiver, and I'm sure they'll happily sign it. I will be interested to see if we start seeing any guys not sign it and what happens to those guys. Like if they're allowed to work out, to play, to practice. I don't think they would be. And I know that sounds drastic, but once again, you've got all these hotshot lawyers at these schools telling people what they got to do, Mike.
Well, and so this is the interesting part of all this is one, it says very clearly at the bottom, they can't touch your scholarship if you are out of line with any of this. Like, they can't come after that. Now, how this aligns with some of your scholarship language is interesting, but a lot of it seems like also you're saying, I'm going to follow all of the health guidelines. Like, it seems like just as much of that of, I'm not going to be allowed to work out unless I agree to follow all these health guidelines. So part of me thinks it's almost kind of giving the coaches a tool of saying, all right, if a kid's told he's got to show up in this spot and he's got to wear a mask and he's got to do X, Y, and Z things, and you know how it is, like guys balk on uniform stuff around locker rooms all the time or any of those enforcements. And they say, well, what are you going to do about it? Now a coach can say, well, if you show up and you're not wearing a mask at this spot or you don't check in with a trainer right now, we can legally not let you work out on here. We won't take your scholarship away, but you won't be able to be with the team. And we know the whole voluntary air quotes thing. If you're not there with the team, that's probably got some other ramifications for you. So that's where all of this gets to be like a weird middle ground. Is part of me looks at it and goes, well, if you're trying to enforce a bunch of very strict health policies on a group of 18 to 22-year-olds that aren't always receptive to following that level of direction, maybe in the best version of this, that's what this document is trying to do. I'm still not sure, and I've read the thing like 10 times now.
I can see it going like this. How we doing on the waivers? We got all the players to sign them? Yeah, coach, everyone except for Justin Fields. He says he's not signing the waiver. Okay, throw the waiver away. Get rid of it. Just bring the guys back.
We don't need the waiver.
Listen, we don't need it. We just watched a bunch of players get like names taken off of buildings and getting signs taken down right now. Like, the players all kind of woke up and realized, hey, if we all say we're not going to do something, these people need us an awful lot. So you're right. If one group of kids is just like, yeah, we don't think this is fair and we're not going to sign it, you're right. It'd probably go straight to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, we've reevaluated and yeah, we're okay with not signing the waiver.
We've discussed it. We've discussed it with our student athletes and we have adjusted our course accordingly. Now, you guys mentioned that, but we're starting to see, especially college football players, use their voice more and become more comfortable speaking out publicly. You see Trevor Lawrence and what's going on at Clemson with the protests, but you also see what's going on at the University of Texas. And student athletes at Texas are demanding changes. Guys, they no longer want the Eyes of Texas as the school song. They want 4 campus buildings that are named after Confederate or racist figures renamed. They want part of the football stadium named after Julius Whittier, the Longhorns' first black player. And they want the athletics department to donate a little over $1 million to black organizations and the Black Lives Matter movement, which all of these things, when you look at it through the eyes of a black student athlete, I mean, make perfect sense. Now, that's not a perspective we had, guys, and we still don't have because we're all white dudes, but it seems pretty doable to me. All of it seems pretty doable except for them changing the school song. I don't see any way in hell that Texas is going to change the Eyes of Texas. I know that the first time there was controversy with the early 1900s, there was blackface involved in this whole thing the first time that it was played. Like, and I get that, and I get the sensitivity of that, but I can't imagine them going away from that song, Mike. I can't. And I know that the players said that they're going to go ahead and practice and still play, but they won't participate in recruiting or alumni events until these changes happen. I think they're going to get several of them. I think the buildings will get changed. I think they'll probably get the donation component. But I really don't see them changing the fight song. Maybe they do. Like we said, the players have the power, but man, that would be interesting.
And we have seen, if you look not too far away in College Station, there are some things going on today and yesterday.
Did you see those old men leading yells to drown out the protesters? That was one of the weirdest damn things I've ever seen. These like 60-year-old guys. Those people, that's a cult. Those A&M people, that's a cult.
But like you said, like around certain things, and you mentioned the eyes of Texas being one of them. Like people draw an interesting line, and this is one of those times where you're right, guys, and especially in mass, like the Texas team seems pretty, together on the idea of going forward with these demands. It would hit harder if their team was better. Like that's also like the very sports reality of a lot of this is all of these demands hit a lot different. Like if Texas had won 11 games last year, this would be, and we looked at this situation and they were ranked in the top 5 preseason or something like that. Like this would hit a lot different, I think. And
that's why the Clemson stuff is getting so much attention, right? Because Trevor Lawrence is Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like at some point in college football and the way that we govern, morality in sports, the more you win, the more likely we are to agree with your side of things.
Here's what's interesting about this whole thing. And, I had no idea about the eyes of Texas or its origin or
it's just that's what I read about it.
No. You're right. You're exactly right.
Anything.
And apparently this isn't like this thing wasn't hatched like over the last week. Apparently there's a bunch of players that have played at Texas for a long time that they've never been comfortable with this song. And after kind of reading the history and looking back
if that's the case, then change it.
Yeah,
just change it.
It totally makes sense. Now here's where it gets interesting for me. Because they've asked for some of the campus buildings to change their name and pull down some of the monuments and all of that stuff's interesting. But my question is, where's the line? Because they want part of the football stadium named after Julius Whittier, the Longhorns' first black player. Here's what I think is really interesting. The stadium is named after Darrell K. Royal. Now, Coach Switzer talks all the time about one of the big advantages that Oklahoma had going in recruiting the state of Texas is that the University of Texas would not recruit black football players. Okay, Julius Whittier was the first black football player at Texas is 1970. Okay, they won the last all-white national championship in 1969. Okay, and there were calls all along to integrate that football team, and they didn't do it. Over like a long span, they only gave 6 scholarships to black football players there. Darrell K. Royal was asked about it several times during that tenure, and he never made an effort to do it. Like, I know we're Oklahoma, but I just conversed that Oklahoma won a 1956 national championship with our first black football player on there, Prentice Scott. So you compare that 1956 all the way to 1969. That's like in the middle of the civil rights movement and everything. So I guess what I'm wondering is, like, because this isn't new with Darrell K. Royal either. So are they going to want the name of the stadium changed at some point? Like,
they should. I mean, since it's named after an OU guy.
Exactly. I'm just wondering, like, where exactly, like, what's the line? Because
no, that is interesting. You're right. That's a good point, Ted.
So, like, whenever you start looking into the history of the Texas football program, and I'm sure some people are doing that a little bit more right now, you can kind of count down the minutes until that article is going to be written on Darrell K. Royal coming up here.
I think what you said is probably the most noteworthy of all this too, is this isn't new. It's been building and guys weren't comfortable speaking up. And we saw that with a lot of what's happening at Iowa with Chris Doyle right now in their strength program of guys have felt a certain way about this, but it wasn't until recently that they felt like voicing their opinion would do anything other than get them shouted down by their fan base. And now that people have been forced to listen, you saw, and with them, it started with guys that had been, players on the team and were pros now and didn't have any fear of repercussions. But for the guys at Texas now, it's all right. We know our voice is going to get heard. And like you said, this had been building for a while. We just now got to talk about it.
Yeah. And Chris Del Conte, Texas athletic director, said that, they're going to look at, what these student athletes said and, look at all of that stuff very carefully. It will be interesting to see if it develops to maybe to see if it escalates at any point where you've got players saying, hey, we're not going to practice, we're not going to play, because if they take a stand like that, I think that University of Texas, they'd be forced, right? And I could foresee that happening if the leadership of Texas comes out and say, like, hey, we hear you, but we're not changing any of this stuff. Then I think you could see some, especially these football players, like what happens if they come out and say, you know what, we hear you, we understand, we're not changing the buildings, we're not changing the song. All of a sudden, a guy like Sam Ehlinger comes out and goes, okay, well, then I'm not playing. That would get very interesting.
High stakes game of poker going on between the athletics department and the players. That'd be
fun to watch.
Be very interesting for sure.
We just saw Marvin Wilson do that at Florida State, and they blinked in a heartbeat. Like the best player on their team was like, we're not doing any of this stuff. And they're like, all right, my bad. We're going to do everything the way you wanted it. But it is weird, especially after Trevor Lawrence has been out here as supportive of guys as he's been. There is probably some renewed pressure on other big-time quarterbacks, especially some of the big-time white quarterbacks at a place like Texas, to say, all right, listen, that guy showed out and was with everybody here. Are you going to be with us in that same way? And I know Sam put out a video at the start of all this and supported his teammates and talked about a lot of the issues, but especially with what they got going on right now, it's a very interesting way to look at this.
Now, Mike, you mentioned, the issues with Chris Doyle, their highest paid strength coach in the country there at Iowa. I would be shocked if he returns as their strength coach at any point in time. But Monday, the athletic director, Gary Barta there at Iowa, announced that they are having a press conference Monday afternoon. Boys, what's going to happen? Is it just Chris Doyle going, or is this something where we could see Kirk Ferentz on his way out there at Iowa? Because at this point, I wouldn't be shocked. Because, how many guys that played at Iowa have come out and said, especially black players, have come out and said that the environment just wasn't good for those guys. And ultimately, and I firmly believe this, and I'll believe it forever when it comes to college football, everything starts at the top. It all starts with the head coach. And the reason that I think that way is because that's what Bob Stoops would say all the time, that it always started with him. Everything that went on in the program, even if he didn't have any knowledge of it, it was on him because it was his program. So I look at Kirk Ferentz and what happened with Chris Doyle and how he made these kids feel. And, we all probably felt very sad at points in time in our college football career being the strength coach.
Yeah.
But is Kirk Ferentz going to be the head coach of Iowa on Tuesday? I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if he says, you know what, I'm retiring.
Well, I agree. It's funny that I feel like all strength coaches hate everyone on the team with an equal passion, right? Every single guy on the roster gets destroyed. But, and we did see the wide receiver, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name, that came back and said that he felt like Coach Ferentz orchestrated the raid on his apartment when he got.
Oh yeah, that was nuts.
Yeah,
he was the first. Drugs. He was really the only one that came out and said, like, "Hey, no, Kirk Ferentz not cool with me." Everyone else seemed to have Kirk Ferentz's back, but certainly not that guy. I forget the guy's name, but
here's, every now and then you're presented with something that you've got to sit down in a meeting and you got to say, let's look at this closely, folks, because we've got an $800,000 a year strength coach. We've got Coach Ferentz, who we just extended through 2025. Now, if we want it, what we have here is an opportunity out of a contract and out of a massive buyout. So if we feel like we've got enough to fire him with cause, then we've got an opportunity. I'm just saying.
Especially with, you don't really know what your revenue is going to look like this year, what seating capacity is going to look like. You already missed out on a lot of money from the NCAA tournament.
Like if you ever feel like you want to make a change and sometimes it presents itself, you got to look a little bit deeper at it. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but if they wanted to, they'd have an opportunity to say some serious cheddar.
They would, and also for Iowa, I guess just as a program trajectory, it's what do they think they can be? Like, does Iowa think within the body of the Big Ten in 2020 that it can, with a proper, with a change right now? Because that's part of the difficulty is Kirk Ferentz, even in the college football playoff era, has had some success on the top end, double-digit win season, stuff like that. But you knew they were never going to beat Ohio State. They're probably never going to, compete on that level with those guys. And so do you think there's trajectory for more? Because in all likelihood, I look at the situation and say, he's one of like the last remaining sort of like figurehead name coaches that's going to be around at a place like that to that tenure. Do they give him another chance to kind of write it and say, all right, like you saw what happens. You mean enough to us and vice versa, where we think we can work this out. There wasn't enough directly implicating you in all of this for us to feel compelled to make a change. We're going to ask you to do a very difficult thing in college football, which is fire your strength and conditioning coach that's been with you for 2+ decades there. And we all know here, like that might be the second most important coaching position on the entire staff because of the amount of time they get with guys and that relationship that those two have. But my gut tells me they're going to give Ferentz a chance to kind of right the ship on this and be on the right side of history, so to speak, in all of this. But you bring up some interesting points about the potential out you have financially for a lot of this, because that's a very real thing.
Because I do know a coach that, played there, is currently unemployed.
Oh, don't do it, Teddy. Don't do it. You're going to make all the OU fans mad.
They wanted him in 99. People say he was close to going to Iowa then. I don't know. Bob Stoops. Maybe if he's wanting to get back in the game, maybe they made that call. That's why they have the press conference. They already made the call. He's interested.
Oh, gosh. This isn't going to turn out well. Now, Mike, before we let you go, I have to let you talk about what I would describe as probably your true passion, and that is The Bachelor. Because Matt James, who played wide receiver at Wake Forest, is the new Bachelor. I believe the first Black Bachelor. Is that right?
Yes. So he's the first Black male contestant on The Bachelor. Rachel Lindsay, who actually works for us at ESPN, was, I believe, the first African-American female that The Bachelor franchise ever had. Big shout out to Rachel, who is an absolute rock star.
She's awesome.
But yeah, Matt is the first Black male Bachelor in all this. So very interesting. Friends with Tyler C., who is another former Demon Deacon alum there as well. So Nicole Arbach, who works for The Athletic, did a great write-up not too long ago on why former athletes, and a lot of them tend to be former football players, tend to have so much success in the franchise. So bodes pretty well for him.
Well, I can't wait to see your tweets about it. And normally when I do watch the episodes, and I don't watch them all, I do text you about it and we have some fun back and forth. But now I really appreciate your time, but how's your love life, bud? What's going on here? We still single, or we got lots of single women, I assume, that listen to this podcast. Like, should we have them reach out? Like, what's going on here?
I'm just shocked that they passed over your resume before they decided to pick the other guy. I mean, come on.
So, well, here's the interesting plot twist on that. So before everything hit with COVID, The Bachelor started doing this traveling live show where they had a couple of former contestants who would be the hosts, and they would do it, casinos, all these different venues where they would get someone local from the area, and they would have you go up there, and they would get other singles, and it would be like one bachelor or bachelorette and then 10 contestants, and they would do it over the course of like 3 hours, and you do like speed dating stuff up there. There was even supposedly a fantasy suite, which seems really wild and really like you flirt with danger. But I was supposed to be the Bachelor for when it came to Connecticut. There was a live show planned for, I think, sometime in like the last week of March or the second week of April. And it was supposed to be at Mohegan Sun, the casino here in Southern Connecticut. And I was supposed to be the guy. We shot like promo stuff for it at work. We did all this stuff leading up to it. And obviously they had to pull the plug like everything else. So I don't know now, like if they resume, do I still get to be the guy? How this works?
Hold on. Did you Instagram the pictures?
Yes.
I remember that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was like me in a full suit air humping. The weird part is I was doing a lot of like air humping and gyrating for the photo shoot, and it was done on ESPN's campus. Like we did it at work. So I don't know if that's, kosher or not with ESPN legal, but
That's great.
it was a lot. So yeah, so I guess I'm holding out hope, as is my mom, who is the biggest fan of me going on that thing ever, that was going to work out. But yeah, listen, if any single Sooner fans listening to the podcast want to holler at your boy, listen, send them my way, Gabe. I trust your guys' judgment on a lot of this. Gabe has known me for a long time too, so I feel like at the very least he would set me up to win here.
Yeah, we'll take care of you. I'm sure we'll have some ladies reach out. Now, you can catch Mike on Golic and Wingo on ESPN Radio. It's also on ESPN2. I watch it all the time. See your beautiful face in the morning. You can catch him everywhere on ESPN. He can talk it all. You're not just there because you're your dad's son, Mike. I don't care what everyone says, buddy.
I'm there because of my beautiful thighs that I show off now that we're back on TV. I like to
saw
say
that.
It's all my good looks now.
Appreciate the time, buddy. Thanks, man.
Good stuff, man.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Oh.
Thanks to Mike Golic Jr. for that. Ted, I love that guy. He is the absolute best.
Ball of energy. I love it. Very smart guy, obviously. Some really good insight there on different things, but fantastic guy, that's for sure. You offensive linemen, man.
We're just good at this stuff. It's what we do, and Mike is going to become kind of a regular on this podcast with some discussions that we've had. So really appreciate his time, Ted. But let's move on to our segments. And since it is Monday, you're going to get some football guys talking basketball. Yes, FGTB. And there are more details about the NBA schedule and more details about the rosters and the construction of those when the NBA returns. Woj and Shams put some of the dates out there. You're going to see a training camp in Orlando for the 22 teams from July 9th to 29th. And there's going to be 3 inter-squad scrimmages within that training camp. You'll start seeing seeding games. Remember those first 8 games that the teams are going to play. That'll start July 30th. The playoffs will begin August 17th. And then the NBA finals will take place September 30th to October 13th. What do you think about the layout? I mean, it's so weird to see NBA basketball going to finish October 13th, and I'm over here going, when's OU Texas?
That's right. We're going to be watching NBA Finals during OU Texas. It's weird. I don't know, honestly, if it's going to be better for basketball or worse. I mean, I know there's a lot competing there with college football and NFL football, all of it happening. So, I mean, people are definitely going to have to decide a little bit as to what they're going to watch. But, you can avoid the hot spots for football if you really want to. I mean, the weekends, Thursday through Sunday, really we're hitting football pretty hard. But, Friday night, which, I know it's not the best television night, but I think it's going to be interesting. It might be kind of cool, but I can't decide yet. It's going to be really weird, but I'm anxious to see actually what it looks like, how many people are watching, do people pay attention to it, or are they going to check out because football's going?
I did see something that said Game 7 would be on October 13th so that the NBA can avoid going head to head with Monday Night Football on the 12th. I was like, at that point, guys,
Monday Night Football may be the best option to go up against, if you think about it. But
maybe it'll be Bills Jets.
Right. I don't know. It's gonna be weird. It's gonna be interesting. one of the things that we've talked about a little bit, but I wonder what type of play we're going to see. I mean, by the time the NBA playoffs
It
have
should
rolled
be in great
around,
shape.
yeah, that's what I'm wondering if, are we used to seeing tired legs in the grind? I mean, it's a long season, and by
Had a
the time you
huge
get to the,
break.
yeah,
What
well, I'm
happens?
saying, like, are we, when we're a typical NBA season in the playoffs, are we seeing tired legs, guys that are worn out from a long season and
Right.
injured, as opposed to now everyone's should be extremely fresh coming in? Is the basketball going to be sloppy? Are the guys going to be conditioned? It's kind of
What
interesting to think about.
what happens in? This buildup. I mean, these guys have plenty of time to be in shape, and I know that you got to play basketball to be in basketball shape. I understand that, but the argument could also be made that this could be some of the best playoff basketball we've ever seen because the guys are going to be fresh,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they had this big long break. Now they're going to have the 8 games to work some of the rust off. They're going to have the mini training camp, the whole thing. But I mean, if you get fresh players, it could lead to some really damn good basketball, and it could be really fun to watch for fans. So that's what I'm hoping that happens. Now, will it work out that way? I have no idea. Will guys be missing shots left and right? Maybe, but what happens if they're fresh? They've got their legs. They've all been working on their games, right? What else have they been doing? I mean, come on. It's what you do for a living. I mean, they've been in the lab, right?
That's why I think the team to watch is the Clippers. I mean,
Healthy
healthy,
Kawhi, healthy Paul George.
fresh. I mean, I would say that that's going to be a defensive heavy basketball team, and um, they're going to rely less on like ball movement and being in rhythm offensively. And I don't know. I kind of like the Clippers right now if they come back ready to roll.
Yeah. A couple other notes for when the NBA returns. Teams can bring as many as 17 players to Orlando. Playoff rosters will be 15. And one really interesting thing is that teams can replace any player who tests positive for the coronavirus with a substitute player. Now, if they have to bring them from outside of Orlando, that substitute has to quarantine for, I believe, a full week. And there is going to be a transaction window in late June where a team like the Thunder could sign Lou Dort to a standard contract if they wanted to. Now, I'm not sure they're going to do that because they could just let his contract run its course and expire and then match any offer sheet this summer because he'll be a restricted free agent and they'll be able to. So it kind of saves you some cash now. So I don't really see, and I'm not a capologist. I don't know enough about it, but it doesn't seem like they need to do that because you get your two-way guys. Now, as far as I understand, Lou Dort on the two-way contract is able to play in the playoffs. Like there's no rule against that. So I don't know why the Thunder already have an open roster spot in general. And we still don't know exactly what's going to happen with Andre Robertson. But Ted, the big story coming out of the weekend in the NBA, second thoughts for some of the players. I know some guys think that maybe playing and going to the bubble there in Orlando may take away from the racism conversation that is very prevalent in this country right now. And I think it makes sense. Like I get it. They don't want to take momentum away from the movement that's going on. And because the NBA is vast majority black athletes. We know that. But couldn't they have picked anyone but Kyrie Irving to lead this charge? I mean,
Right.
come on.
Yeah, he's
He
rubbed
said
some
the
people
earth
the
was
wrong way.
flat, Ted.
Yeah,
And he wasn't joking.
Yeah, I don't know. Here's the thing. If the guys are having second thoughts and they don't want to take away from the conversation that's taking place, well, then don't. you don't have to go to Orlando, play a basketball game, and then keep your mouth shut, right? You can say just as much there, and you'll have a bigger platform there than anywhere else. So
That's how I was seeing it. It's like people are
you
going to
want
be watching the games. You can use you can use all the interviews to get your message out, say what you need to say, in-game interviews, post-game interviews. They're going to have a gigantic platform when they go and play those games in Orlando. I mean, there's going to be all kinds of attention on them. Now, maybe I'm thinking of it wrong, but it seems like that attention would be more helpful to the cause, right? If they put the
well,
proper messages out there. Am I crazy for thinking of it that way?
well, I'll give you the flip side of that. No, you're not thinking of it the wrong way. You're thinking of it the right way. But if these guys do that, they're obviously throwing their brand at risk, right?
Right.
So is it easier to sit back and let the conversation go on elsewhere without having to throw your hat in the mix and possibly disrupt what it is that you've built with your brand? Because, right, wrong, however you want to view it, that if these guys start using the cameras and the interviews and the actual game broadcast to have some type of protest or whatever it is going on, that will affect their brand. Some people will not look on that kindly. So I mean, that's just kind of looking at the flip side of it, if that's what they're thinking possibly. But other than that,
you don't think they're going to adopt the Baker Mayfield mentality? Like, hey, if it makes you mad, it makes you mad. But hey, I am what I am. This is what I believe. And if I lose fans, then I'll deal with that. I would assume the NBA guys would adopt the Baker Mayfield mentality, right? That we saw from the weekend.
well, if you watch the way they dealt with the China situation, then no, that you would
That's
not
a good
think
point.
that. You would think that all of a sudden they would go completely quiet on the topic.
Well, the bottom line is, I think the players, I think they should go play. I think they should use that opportunity to, further the cause, further the battle that they're fighting for racial injustice in this country. I think that's a great way to do it. And frankly, if they don't play, they don't get paid. And it's not a moral decision or a what's the philosophical? I don't know.
You nailed it.
Nailed it.
Time.
Whatever that word is. And it's not that. It's just a business decision. Like you got to play to get paid. I mean, that's how pro sports works. And when Bobby Marks laid it out on Twitter, said, hey, the players can do what they want. Of course they can. But the financial hit that the players in the league would take if they don't play, there would be $1.2 billion lost in player salary. There would be $2 billion lost in revenue to the league, and it would give the NBA leverage to tear up the collective bargaining agreement and negotiate a new one going into next year, where the salary cap is going to take a hit because of those revenue shortages. So
it's going to take a huge hit. I would think if they factor in the full loss of the revenue, then yeah, substantial.
So the players have a lot to think about. This is extremely complicated.
Think about if you're a guy like Trae Young's coming up on his next deal, and before the coronavirus, he was set to sign a deal that would have been a $200 million contract. And, if the salary cap changes that much because of the hit to revenue this year, that could affect his salary, not just by a couple of $1 million, by like $50, $75 million over the length of 4 or 5 years. That's insane.
Well, when you think about it, these guys are going to have to weigh the future of this country when it comes to how black people are treated and their financial future. They're going to have to weigh both of those things. That's a lot. I mean, that's tough, but I still firmly believe that the vast majority guys are going to show up in Orlando and play, and we're going to get NBA basketball, and Thunder are going to win it all, and there's not going to be an asterisk, and I am going to love every second of it. All right,
That's right.
let's move on to our winners and losers of the weekend. Ted, like man Toby Keith says, we got winners, we got losers. Who you got as your winner of the weekend?
Okay, so I've got a winner and I've got a loser, but they both can either be a winner or loser. So I'm just going to give you a name, and you tell me winner or loser.
Gotcha. Okay.
Bryson DeChambeau.
Winner. Beefcake. Everyone was talking about him.
No, exactly.
Winner. And finished what, second?
Yeah, he's now 250
Third.
pounds. He went from a dork to a defensive end, and it's unbelievable. He is jacked out of his skull, and he says he wants to get to 280. Why? I mean,
what is he doing?
How that helps your golf swing, I have no idea.
I'm telling you, there is a mathematical reason he wants to get there, right? He talks about the angles and what all the irons, the same length, all that stuff that people may have been making fun of him for years. There is a math reason he wants to get that heavy. I'm not sure what it is, but we need to find out.
No, I was going to say he's a loser because he's done the equivalent of hitting 70 home runs in a season, all right, which means everyone in the world right now is talking about whether or not he's doing it, talking about DeChambeau being on some type of performance-enhancing drug, and whenever that happens, the tests start coming around, and we'll see what happens. But that's how he would have been my loser. In
his defense, he won $366,000 this weekend. So solid weekend. Good for him.
Hey, how about that? Okay, so since he was the winner, the loser, unfortunately, has to be Baker Mayfield.
Disagree with that, but
he came out with his stance, which power to him for that. But when he talked about it, if you're with me, you're with me. If you're not, you're not. There's going to be a lot of people that are not.
Correct, for sure.
That's unfortunate for him. That's just the way it's going to be. And here's the one thing that'll help: win football games.
That's it.
If you go out there and start losing, it's going to be amplified even more so. So, that's why I had him, or you could pick him as a winner or a loser. Unfortunately, he may end up losing some fans out of this, which whatever. That's just kind of how it's going to go. But it's yet another thing that's going to be, it's going to be a microscope on Baker Mayfield even more.
Right. And, you can have whatever stance you want to have when it comes to kneeling for the anthem. I think at this point, it is very well documented that it is in no way trying to disrespect the flag or the military. I mean, you've heard guy after guy after guy say that. You've heard military members say that. I will always respect people, and that's Baker Mayfield, and what he did this weekend is a perfect example. I will always respect people that say, hey, I know that people aren't going to like this, but it's what I believe, so it's what I'm doing. I will always respect people that are true to themselves and that they are doing what they think is right. I respect people that don't care about what other people think, and they do what they want to do because they think it's the right thing to do. I can't criticize that. I'm not going to criticize Baker Mayfield. I'm sure plenty of people will. I'm not going to be one of them. I'm going to judge him by the way he plays on Sundays. That's how I'll judge him. So it is what it is. But, yeah, I think you're right, Ted. I think he's going to lose some fans, and I think he made it clear. He doesn't really care.
And he shouldn't.
Just play good football. All right, my winner. Football. Yeah, play good football, and you'll be all right. My winner of the weekend goes to amateur golfers like us, Ted, like me and you, because how many times have you had a 2-footer, 3-footer, and you don't even touch the cup, or it lips out, you want to throw the putter into the lake, you scream all the obscenities, and you feel like an absolute loser. That ever happened to you there, bud?
Sure. I'll tell you, my typical routine on a 2 or 3 foot putt is to step back, look at it for an extra long time, and give all the people I'm playing with time to say, "Oh no, that's good.
That's
Pick
good.
it up. Let's go."
Well,
that's how I usually attack the 3-footer.
Well, I assume Xander Schauffele wishes that happened there on 17, where he was leading the tournament and then had just a brutal lip out. And then you saw Colin Morikawa miss that putt in the playoff. And I'm not going to lie. First of all, congratulations to Daniel Berger. That's a hell of a win there at the Charles Schwab Challenge. $1.4 million for our man Daniel Berger. That's nice. But watching those two guys miss those putts, it's just kind of one of the universal rules of golf. It makes us all feel better. It makes us all feel better. So we're the winners of the weekend. I watched those two guys miss those putts, and I go, hey, they're just like us.
And that was just a bonus for me after watching Jordan Spieth 3-putt from 3 feet earlier in the week. That was just a bonus, right? It's kind of like the 17th at, is it Spyglass, the island green where guys are shanking it into the water all day long. It just makes you feel a little bit better about yourself.
Yeah. So I saw them miss those, 3-footers, and I was like, nice. I feel good. I feel good about myself. My loser.
Now, if they would just hook it 4 fairways over, like I do,
that'd be. If they were just playing the hole from the the hole next door, then they would know what I really feel like. But
they were missing the 3-footer for birdie or par, not missing the 3-footer for an 8, like I was
for triple bogey. Yeah, no, we've all been there. But my loser of the weekend is lovers of the collegiate model. And you know who you are. You love college athletics. You don't want it to change at all. Well, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has other ideas because he has signed a bill allowing college athletes to make money from endorsements from their name, image, and likeness in the state of Florida. And that takes effect on July 1st, 2021, 18 months sooner than the bills that have been passed in Colorado and California. So the pressure is on the NCAA. They have just over a year to get Congress to pass federal legislation, which is what they want to happen, or they're going to have to deal with the patchwork of the state-by-state situation. I like it, Ted. I like Florida putting the NCAA in a bind, forcing the issue. The NCAA said, hey, trust us on this. And Florida said, nope, figure it out. So loser of the weekend, people that love the collegiate model, because that thing is about to die, my friend.
Let me ask a quick question. And I agree with you. Let's say that Florida State, for example. Florida State right now is currently under, this is hypothetical. Florida State is under investigation from the NCAA because a player took some type of benefit from someone that was deemed an NCAA violation. Now, if this law passes and some of those things are happening right now that in light of the new NCAA, whenever they issue whatever guidelines it is and all that takes effect, like that's going to be really weird, right? Because I know
like, what's the word for it? Like retroactively, is that the right word?
Right.
Where you would be able to go back and punish them because it happened before the law took effect.
Right. It's going to be, there's got to be some cases out there.
That sounds like something the NCAA would definitely do. So I think you're on to something, Ted.
It's just interesting. Like for instance, Oklahoma State's deal. Now, I know that wouldn't directly impact any of the players that went on, or maybe Kansas's is a better example. And I don't know that whatever ended up happening there would be allowed under this new law or new guidelines that the NCAA is going to institute. But it's interesting, like, are they going to continue these punishments and people that are under postseason bans or scholarship limitations for things that would now be deemed legal? So I don't know. That's interesting if any of those cases are out there.
Yeah, that is. I can't imagine the NCAA. They're going to hold on to that power as long as they can. We saw what they did to Oklahoma State's basketball program.
That's right.
Wonder how that appeal's going. By the way, all right, Ted. Let's move on.
I would guess really slow if I know the NCAA.
Not going well, I would assume. Let's move on to everyone's favorite segment of the podcast, and that is Keeping It Local, where we highlight what's going on in the great state of Oklahoma. And it's always our favorite when it is sports related, and this one is because Trae Young is the man. This is a 21-year-old guy, and the maturity and leadership that he's shown in the Norman community and in the state of Oklahoma over the last couple of weeks has been impressive. Now, we saw him speak at the peaceful protest there in Norman, did a great job, had a great message. We saw him be part of a letter that was written to Governor Stitt, along with Westbrook and Blake Griffin, to commute Julius Jones's prison sentence. But he made a big-time move this weekend, and he's agreed, I believe along with his family, he's agreed to make a $4 million donation toward a multi-sport facility in Norman. Now he's going to get some naming rights and gets to help design it, from what I understand. But Teddy, this is right in your wheelhouse. This is a big-time investment, big-time gift from Trae Young to the city of Norman.
He's been fantastic, man. He really has. Just 21 years old. He's only 21, and how long? It seems like 10 years ago whenever he played for OU for that season, doesn't it? I mean, that seems like it was so long ago, and he's accomplished such great things.
It was 2018, because I remember I woke up. We were in Hawaii on our honeymoon, and I woke up to watch that game, to watch them lose. So, yeah. It for some reason, I don't know, it feels like he's been in the NBA forever, and he hasn't, but this kid's maturity it's just impressive to have this understanding at that age. That's big time, man. $4 million.
Whew. $4 million is a big chunk. And that's $4 million after you've paid taxes on it. That's really close to an $8 million donation. So as far as earnings, that's huge for the city of Norman. And man, I just hope that whenever it's done and it's designed the way he wants and it's named the way he wants, that it gets the use that he intends. And I think it's going to be great for the community. Everyone in the city of Norman and surrounding area are going to be able to use it for whatever the purpose that he designates. I'm sure there'll be a basketball hoop or two in there, so that's going to be cool.
Yeah, and I believe also in an aquatic center. Maybe you can get Edward there.
Yeah.
Get him swimming some laps.
That's right. We'll do it. We were swimming some laps today. It's going to be
How'd
cool.
it go? Is he a good swimmer?
He's pretty good, man. For a 5, he's pretty good. He's got it down pretty good. Last year, he was iffy, and I was a nervous dad a lot. But now he's pretty good. He could be trusted a little bit out there.
Good. It's good to hear. All right, let's finish it like we always do, and that is with a Twitter question from a listener. And this one is right down your alley, Ted, okay, because it allows you to be a manly ass man. So here we go. This one comes from John Rodriguez at Hamburglar_helper on Twitter, which is an elite Twitter name. He says, Name any celebrity you are positive you could beat up.
Well, I mean,
Like
there's a bunch of them. Are we supposed to pick like the one that would be the biggest challenge?
So he also added, he wants to know one that you could beat up, or one you are positive you could beat up, and then one celeb you think could handle you. I think The Rock would beat my ass, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would have to assume. So, I mean, that dude's got some serious muscles, but he's also seems like a really nice dude.
Yeah, you never know, man. You never know. He looks the part for sure, but The Rock would be definitely one that you'd have to pick that he could take you. I'm trying to pick someone that I feel like, okay, this might be a tight fight. This may be, a tough scrap, and I could win it or else I'd pick like Leonardo DiCaprio, which I'd kick his ass in like 10 seconds. You know what I'm saying? So I don't want to pick someone like that.
I don't think that dad bod is conducive to being a good fighter. Now, we could be wrong, but
listen, he makes the big bucks with the face too. He's not one that's going to be a guy that's prone to sticking it in there and trying to get in a fight. Man, a lot of times people tell me that I look like Vin Diesel because I've got the bald head, but it's frustrating because I know I could kick Vin Diesel's ass. So I'll pick Vin Diesel.
So that's who you're going with, Vin Diesel.
I guess.
I'm going with an easy one. I would beat the shit out of George Clooney. Like I would. Now, I want to make it clear, I would never want to do that because I am a huge George Clooney fan. Love his work as an actor. Love his work as an activist. Love his work when it comes to tequila, right?
Yeah.
I think he does like Nespresso too. I love Nespresso. It's great. I love everything about George Clooney, but the guy's 5'11", and he's too pretty. He's too pretty. It'd be an easy win. Easy one.
That's true.
I'm very, 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 very confident. And remember, they don't get their security guards, all the gigantic people around them that they're used to protecting them. Me and Clooney in an octagon, love my chances. Love my chances. And I will celebrate it with him with some shots of Casamigos, for sure.
What celebrity would you most like to fight, though? Like, honestly. Like you want to fight them.
Like you just don't like them?
You don't like them. You want to fight them.
Oh, man. I don't really get that. I'd like to think that I don't let celebrities influence my life that much.
I asked the question, and I'm sitting here thinking I can't even think of anyone.
I think – see, part of me thinks Kanye West because he just says some things where he's like, what are you talking about? But then I love his music, so I wouldn't want to harm him because I love music. Huh.
We may have to come back to that one.
Yeah, that's one that we'll think about over the – maybe we'll start Thursday's episode with, you know what, we thought about
what celebrity we want to fight. I've decided I want to fight so-and-so. Yeah, I like it.
Well, Ted, episode 16 in the books. We'll have a new podcast that'll drop Thursday morning where I guess we'll tell you what celebrity we want to fight the most. Just a reminder, you can hear Teddy from 2 to 6 on Sports Talk 1400. You can hear me on SiriusXM Big 12 Radio, channel 375. And if you are interested in sponsoring the podcast, you can email us at theoklahomabreakdown@gmail.com. We hope you all have a great week. And until next time, we appreciate y'all for listening. And do what you always do, Oklahoma. Take care of each other.